Imagine being on the battlefield, surrounded by death and destruction, and suddenly, everything changes. Enemy soldiers emerge from their trenches, offering greetings and gifts. Together, they sing Christmas carols, play football, and share food and drink. This is not a scene from a Hollywood movie, it's the remarkable true story of the Christmas Truce of 1914, a moment of humanity in the midst of one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. Join us as we explore this extraordinary event and discover how it demonstrated that even in the darkest of moments, peace and compassion are possible. The Christmas Truce of 1914 was an extraordinary event that occurred during World War I. It was an unofficial truce that took place along the Western Front on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Soldiers from both the Allied and German forces spontaneously laid down their arms and engaged in a temporary cessation of hostilities, coming together to celebrate Christmas and to exchange greetings, gifts, and stories. This video will explore the significance of the Christmas Truce of 1914, the conditions on the Western Front that led up to it, and how it demonstrated that even in the midst of a brutal war, people are capable of setting aside their differences and coming together in peace. To understand the significance of the Christmas Truce of 1914, it is important to provide some background information about the conditions on the Western Front in 1914. World War I had been raging for several months, and both sides had suffered heavy casualties. The soldiers were exhausted, living in harsh conditions in trenches dug into the earth. The trenches were muddy, cold, and infested with rats and lice. The soldiers suffered from illness and disease, and many were wounded or killed by the constant shelling. The war was fought using new, sophisticated weaponry that caused mass destruction and casualties. Trench warfare became the dominant form of fighting, with soldiers living in trenches for weeks or even months on end. The constant exposure to the elements, combined with the unsanitary living conditions, made it difficult for soldiers to maintain good health. Trench foot, a painful and debilitating condition caused by prolonged exposure to damp and cold, was common. The truce begins. On Christmas Eve 1914, German soldiers began decorating their trenches with candles and singing Christmas carols. The Allied soldiers responded by singing carols of their own. The soldiers then began shouting greetings to each other, and eventually, they emerged from their trenches and began to meet in no man's land, the area between the opposing trenches. This was a remarkable moment of humanity in the midst of a brutal war. The truce was not uniform across the Western Front, and it varied from place to place. In some areas, the truce lasted only for a few hours, while in others it lasted from 24 to 26 December. In some cases, the truce allowed the soldiers to retrieve their dead and wounded from the battlefield. Celebrations and exchanges. In no man's land, soldiers from both sides exchanged gifts, such as cigarettes, chocolate, and other small items. They also played football, soccer, together, shared food and drink, and even held joint burials for their fallen comrades. Many soldiers took the opportunity to exchange stories and photographs with their counterparts from the other side. This brief period of peace allowed the soldiers to see each other as fellow human beings rather than enemies. The football games played during the truce have become a significant part of the legend of the Christmas truce. The games were a symbol of the soldiers' desire to put aside their differences and come together in a spirit of camaraderie. The significance of the truce. The Christmas truce was significant for several reasons. First, it demonstrated that even in the midst of a brutal war, people are capable of setting aside their differences and coming together in peace. The soldiers were tired of the constant fighting and wanted to celebrate Christmas with their comrades, many of whom they had come to know and respect. The truce showed that there was still room for kindness, empathy, and understanding in the midst of war. The truce has also become a symbol of hope and compassion, reminding us of the common humanity that exists even in times of war. Another significance of the truce was that it challenged the stereotypes and caricatures that the soldiers had of each other. Before the truce, soldiers were often portrayed by their leaders and the media as savage beasts with no regard for human life. The Christmas truce, however, allowed the soldiers to see each other as individuals, rather than as faceless enemies. They could see that their counterparts on the other side were just like them, with families and loved ones back home, hopes and dreams for the future, and the same fears and anxieties that they themselves felt. Furthermore, the truce showed that even in the midst of war, there were common values that the soldiers shared. Many of them were religious, and Christmas was a time for celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ. The fact that soldiers from both sides were willing to set aside their differences and celebrate together showed that they shared a common bond, a common humanity that transcended national boundaries and political ideologies. Finally, the Christmas truce had a significant impact on the soldiers themselves. Many of them later wrote about how the truce had changed their view of the war and their place in it. Some even described it as a spiritual experience, a moment of transcendence that gave them hope and renewed their faith in humanity. The truce had given them a glimpse of a world without war, a world where people could live together in peace and harmony. As we conclude this video, let us remember the Christmas truce of 1914 as a testament to the power of humanity and the hope for peace in times of war. Let us honor the memory of those soldiers who laid down their arms and came together in a brief moment of brotherhood. May their actions inspire us to strive for a world where conflicts are resolved through understanding and compassion, and where the spirit of unity prevails over the forces of division. Let us continue to hold on to the message of the Christmas truce and work towards a future where such truces are no longer necessary, and peace reigns supreme. I hope you liked the video and see you soon.